You've probably heard of the London beer flood as a joke, a quirky little historical footnote. That is exactly what you were supposed to think. Because underneath the punchline are 8 bodies, and a British parliament that compensated the killers, not the killed. After this flood kills 8 people, including a 3-year-old girl, the British government doesn't punish the brewery, doesn't fine them. Instead, Parliament writes the brewery a check, a refund for the beer that drowned its neighbors. The dead receive nothing. But here's what most people never learn about this story. The most disturbing detail isn't the flood itself. It's what happens to the bodies afterward. The road to that horror begins with something absurd. In the late 1700s, London's biggest breweries are locked in an arms race. Not over taste, not over quality. Over size. Meux, Barclay Perkins, Truman, competing to build the largest fermentation vats ever constructed. These colossal wooden containers become tourist attractions. Breweries host banquets inside them. But here's where the story turns sinister. Like all arms races, this one has a breaking point, and that breaking point sits on Tottenham Court Road, directly above a neighborhood full of sleeping children. By 1795, Meux Company erects the crown jewel, a vat standing 22 feet tall, holding over 135,000 imperial gallons of porter, a dark, heavy beer that requires months of aging. This is not engineering. It's a billboard, a monument to corporate vanity built directly above one of the most desperate slums in the British Empire. And what historians have consistently overlooked is just how preventable what comes next truly is. The neighborhood in the shadow of Meux Brewery is called Street Giles, known in 1814 as the Rookery, one of the most overcrowded slums in England. Entire families, 8, 10, 12 people, crammed into single rooms. The poorest of the poor live even lower, in basement cellars beneath the street. No drainage, no ventilation. One door in, one door out. Remember that detail. When something fills those rooms, there is nowhere to go. The people of St. Giles don't drink beer because they want to. They drink it because London's water will kill them. The Thames is an open sewer. Cholera stalks every well. For the poor, weak beer is the safest liquid available. The brewery next door isn't just a nuisance, it's survival. On the afternoon of October 17, 1814, the thing keeping them alive is about to become the thing that kills them. Late afternoon, a brewery clerk named George Crick notices something wrong. An iron band around the giant vat has slipped out of place. He reports it. His superiors tell him not to worry. The bands slip all the time. 1 hour later, that band snaps with a sound witnesses describe as a cannon shot. The vat doesn't leak. It detonates. And nobody talks about what happens in the next 15 seconds, because it sounds impossible. The erupting vat sends a shock wave across the brewery floor, and the force ruptures every vessel it touches. One after another, surrounding vats burst open in a chain reaction. 1.47 million liters of 10-month-old porter converges into a single churning mass. It smashes through the brewery's brick wall like paper. The flood surges into New Street, tears the fronts off 2 houses, and collapses the rear wall of the Tavistock Arms pub. Witnesses describe a wave, brown, foaming, reeking of yeast, 15 feet high. It roars through the alleys of St. Giles. And then it finds those basement cellars I told you about. In the cellars, there is no warning. The beer doesn't trickle in. It erupts through doorways and cracks in stone walls. Within seconds, rooms are chest-deep in heavy dark liquid. Families eating supper. Children being put to bed. People sitting in the only shelter they can afford, suddenly fighting for air in total blackness. Some are pinned beneath collapsed furniture. Some are pushed under by the sheer weight of the current. Above ground, the streets are chaos, screaming, splintering timber, the thick, sweet stench of porter in every breath. Below the surface, 8 people are in the last moments of their lives. 8 people die in the London beer flood. I want you to know their names. Eleanor Cooper, 3 years old. She's in a basement when the wave hits. Hannah Banfield and her 4-year-old daughter, found together, drowned in each other's arms. Elizabeth Smith, 27. Catherine Butler, 63. And Seville. Thomas Murray, a young boy pulled from the wreckage too late. Each name appears in the coroner's record. Each belongs to someone who was alive 15 seconds before that iron band snapped. And then there is Mary Mulvey, whose death is the single cruelest detail in this entire disaster. Mary Mulvey is a teenager. On the afternoon of October 17th, she is not at home. She's in a basement room on New Street attending a wake, a funeral gathering for a 2-year-old boy who has just died of illness. The mourners are huddled together, grieving one child, when 1.47 million liters of beer tear through the wall. They're swept off their feet. Mary Mulvey drowns at a funeral. She walks in to mourn one death and becomes another. But the cruelty of this disaster doesn't end with the drowning. What happens to the bodies afterward is something I've never seen reported in any mainstream retelling of this story. In the hours after the flood, residents pour into the streets with pots, pans, kettles, anything that holds liquid. They're scooping beer from the gutters. This isn't celebration. This is survival economics. Free beer represents real value to people who have nothing. But then a local entrepreneur sees a different opportunity. He lays the recovered corpses out in a house and charges admission. A penny to look at the dead. So many gawkers crowd the viewing room that the floor collapses into the flooded cellar below, creating a second mass casualty event. London's newspapers report this detail as comedy. And then comes the verdict. The coroner's inquest convenes. The jury examines the evidence, the snapped iron, the oversized vats, the structural neglect, the 8 bodies. Their verdict, an act of God. No punishment. No fines, no blame. But that's only the first outrage. Meux Company petitions Parliament for a refund on the excise tax paid on the lost beer. Parliament grants it. Every penny. £7,250, over $660,000 in today's money. The brewery is made whole. The families of the dead? Nothing. Not a shilling from the brewery. Not a penny from the Crown. Not one line of legislation to prevent it from happening again. The beer was worth compensating. The people were not. Sit with that. A company builds an absurdly oversized vat, not because they need it, but because it makes good advertising. They erect it above a neighborhood where families sleep underground. When it explodes and drowns 8 human beings, the legal system calls it God's will. Then the government reimburses the company for its lost product. In 1814 London, a barrel of porter has more legal protection than a 3-year-old girl asleep in a cellar. This is not some medieval relic. This is industrial-age capitalism operating exactly as designed. And the final chapter of this story proves the system didn't just fail these people, it erased them entirely. In the decades that follow, the entire Rookery is bulldozed. Its alleys paved over, its cellars filled with rubble. Today, the streets where Eleanor Cooper and Mary Mulvey died lie beneath the wide avenues around Tottenham Court Road and Centrepoint Tower. There is no memorial, no plaque, no marker of any kind. The brewery itself eventually closes, its site absorbed into the expanding city. The ground where 8 people drowned in a preventable industrial disaster is literally paved over, as if they never existed. Most people who walk those streets today have never heard a single one of their names. History remembers what power decides is worth remembering. The London beer flood survives in pub trivia and novelty listicles, a funny story about people drowning in beer. But there is nothing funny about Eleanor Cooper, or Hannah Banfield clutching her daughter, or Mary Mulvey, who walked into a funeral and never walked out. You were told this was a punchline. Now ask yourself, who decided you should laugh?